Coming up on episode 56 of the Upful LIFE Podcast.
It's so easy improvising with people like that. It's the same thing with Bobby Previtt or Matt Chamberlain, drummer in Critters Buggin, or Bobby Previtt in Omaha Diner and various groups, Ponga, is that the three of those drummers, they are composers in their own right. They write music, and even more importantly, they're highly compositional improvisers. They're just constantly outlining perfectly everything. The path is just being made constantly with the foundation of the drums, the way they improvise. It's just, I'm just constantly amazed. The three of those people particularly, it's a whole nother level of improvising. And it's a kind of improvising that I like, which is highly compositional. So it sounds like writing, sounds like pre-written material, but it's completely improvised. So it has the best of both worlds, right? Yeah, I really wish that band was together today in certain ways, because I feel like there's a whole new awareness of funk and hip hop and played by jazz musicians that's really popular. And I think, no one did it like the Taint.
Yes, indeedy. Welcome to the Upful LIFE Podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz, and this is episode number 56, coming at you live and direct from the Vibe Junkie Studios in Oakland, California. 5-6, all up in your mix. And it's just about time for Jazz Fest. So grateful you are tuning in. Yes, indeedy. It is my honor and privilege to welcome the one and only Skerik to episode 56 of the Upful LIFE Podcast. And it's hard to know where to start with this cat, but you're going to find out a whole lot about his career and his journey and his perspective and mindset. But I can't really give you a synopsis of his career in a short introduction on a podcast. I'm going to hit the skerikmusic.com about page and read just a little bit of his lengthy bio. Decade upon decade, Skerik remains the tireless steward for one of modern music's most diverse, adventurous, and passionate bodies of work. Skerik's world is one where dialogue flows freely between wildly disparate strains of musical thought, where no borders exist between jazz and sludge metal, where elements of Congolese soukous, dialect might find their way onto the million-selling records of an alternative rock band, where an avant-garde electronic translation of Ornette Coleman's deepest and darkest fantasies, shared with a select few listeners in a small club, easily attains the same level of satisfaction and meaning as an exuberant explosion of jazz funk catharsis shared with hordes of sweaty festival crowds all over the world. It is a world where all sounds may communicate freely with each other, so long as they all originate from true inspiration and good faith. They may encounter friction and chaos along the way, eventually emerging in a shared harmonious understanding. Or perhaps they might remain in friction and chaos, screaming in musical hellfire until the next chapter begins. Safety is never guaranteed in these woods, but boredom will never rear its head. That's a promise. Woo! That's good shit right there, Skerik. Whoever wrote that bio for you. Tip of the Kangol. But you're listening to the latest Garage à Trois record, Calm Down Cologne. Started with the title track and just segued into, what's this one called? In a Pro. And these are improv jams saved for the title track. But we're going to hear all about the record. We're going to hear all about Skerik's colorful, fantastic voyage, if you will. Some of the luminaries and collaborators that he touches on include Stanton and Charlie from OG Garage à Trois. That's Stanton Moore and Charlie Hunter. Of course, he talks more about Charlie's other projects like Omaha Diner and Coalition of the Willing. He talks about Ponga with Bobby Previtt. We get deep into the syncopated Taint Septet. But I mean, we left a whole lot on the table too. You know, we talked a bit about his work with Mad Season and Lane Staley, Mike McCready, and Barrett from Screaming Trees, the late Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, and of course Mike McCready from Pearl Jam. Talked a little bit about Chris playing some of that music with the late Chris Cornell. And we also talked a little bit about Mark Lanigan, who passed away just a couple of weeks after this conversation. So I thought whether or not I should leave it in, but it's a beautiful sentiment from Skerik with regard to Mark and his legacy and his music and his spirit. So left it in, but it is a little bit of an emotional bump in an otherwise pretty standard, engaging music conversation with true icon, legend of his time. Skerik, short, I believe, for Scary Eric, or Skerik, as Les Claypool like to call him. Found him at Jazz Fest many moons ago, that Garage à Trois show that opened for Oysterhead at my first Jazz Fest, which we talked about with Mike Dillon, and I've been following him ever since. But we don't really have a relationship, so this is more an interview than a conversation between friends. And he's a tough nut to crack, that Skerik, but I like to think we did okay once we got the engine turned over. So I hope you all enjoy it. Tried to put it together in time for people traveling to and from Jazz Fest. Can't wait to see Skerik down in the Crescent City. And yeah, that should do it for the introduction. Skerik coming up, episode 56, Upful LIFE Podcast. Yes, indeedy.
All right. Well, it's a long time in the making, an honor and a privilege today to welcome the great saxophonist Skerik to the Upful LIFE Podcast.
What up?
My man, I got to tell you, it's like I do this, for a living, but it never gets old to pop on and see somebody like yourself who I've been a fan of, for over 2 decades, and seeing the different twists and turns of your career and collaboration. So to have an opportunity to speak with you, I interviewed you once on the phone a few years ago, but just to see you and talk to you, it's an honor and a privilege. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So just the other night, we were up in Marin, Sweetwater, got an opportunity to see the OG Garage de Trois.
Okay.
Yeah. Went to the Friday night show, the middle night. And then I watched the live stream on Saturday. Yeah, it certainly was. Yeah.
Friday was good. Thursday was rough.
Why is that? Just getting started? What makes, why you look at Thursday like that?
I'm just obsessing over, like, I had a really stiff reed, really hard reed, and it was really hard to play. It was like, I shouldn't do those things. Self-inflicted wound.
Right on. And then, but you had it figured out by Friday.
Yep, definitely.
Cool. Well, yeah, it was just great it's just great to see music again, obviously, after the past couple years and some starts and stops. I wanted to ask you, just as somebody who makes their way in this world performing on stage, what's it like right now, getting back out into the nightclubs? What was the vibe on stage, and how did you perceive the audience in that regard?
Yeah. Well, I mean, those guys have been playing more than me, but I've been doing a fair amount of shows too, and it's kind of back to normal for me. It doesn't feel as strange before, but the problem is I'm not doing 200 shows a year, for the past 2.5 years. And that has really taken a toll physically. So trying to get back into shape, it's really hard, not where I want to be at all, so.
Sure.
But the Garage de Trois shows were good in that regard. It's just like I'm trying to train, trying to exercise every day, and trying to get something going on. There's nothing like, I can practice every day in my studio here, and it just doesn't, it's not the same as playing live at all.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it sounds like not unlike a athletic sports team, you got to play in the season and practice and keep yourself in like a physical, mental space. So the long gaps between performances, I guess, is not unlike, an athlete in that regard. But I don't think fans consider that. So it's an important thing to raise. I think a lot of fans just think, snap of the fingers, you sell some tickets, you get back on stage, you pick up where you left off in 2019. And it obviously doesn't work like that. But from the audience perspective, I mean, Friday night was fantastic. Wouldn't have known that there was any rust or any struggling to pick up, your pace. I mean, we didn't feel that in the audience at all. And you talk about the chemistry. I've listened to some interviews and read about the chemistry between, Stanton and Charlie and yourself and those guys. That's got to play into it, right? Like the history, the chemistry enables you to maybe get up to speed a little quicker than you might otherwise with other cats.
Yeah, I mean, we have a thing that's ready to go, but it's also very challenging playing with those guys. So it's a double-edged sword. There's familiarity, but there's also really high level that has to be achieved, to hang.
Sure.
It's like, it's not, it's not messing around at all. It takes a lot of preparation for me and a lot of focus to pull off playing with those guys. mean, it's just a whole nother thing. But, you know, I'm glad people, you know, it's hard when, you know, you asked about the COVID thing. You know, I look up in Marin County, I was like, oh, it's 92% vaccination rate, and et cetera. You know, you kind of look at statistics and the club. I mean, people have been buying tickets and not showing up there. So it's, you know, it's difficult in that regard. It's kind of hard to figure out how to play, and I don't want to be a person that's just, you know, well, I need to play, you know, it's like, I don't care about people's health, you know?
Right.
So it's tricky, you know. I definitely don't want to come off as like that, you know, but I mean, I just communicate a lot with the locals and people in a certain market before we agree to play somewhere. You know, is this a good idea? Is this a responsible thing? And, you know, people are wearing masks most of the time. Saturday night, there was, you know, a bunch of people that weren't. I would have preferred that, you know, everyone, especially in a smaller club, when you're, you know, I want everyone to be looking out for each other. And, you know, it's, if we want live music to continue and flourish and get back to it, you know, we need to be responsible and do things differently than in the past.
I thought that the mask wearing at your show was more than the norm in my experience on Friday night. I thought that I saw more masks per capita than normal. And I live in Oakland. So we, you know, when we do go to concerts, we're going to the Black Cat or the Boom Boom Room or the Fillmore. And I didn't see it so much as I did the other night. So that was encouraging. And yeah, I was looking at pictures of like Mos Def and Talib Kweli in Paris last week, and every audience member is masked in France.
Well, that might have been, was that at a theater?
Yeah.
So that's different too, because when you're at a club like Boom Boom Room or Sweetwater, it's a club where people are drinking.
Right.
So they're taking their masks off and drinking, and, you know, whereas a theater, you know, they're drinking before or after, and, you know, maybe they don't serve in the theater, you know what I mean? So I think it's easier to be masked. But I mean, obviously in Paris, it's a whole different, there's different rules and stuff there too.
With regard to like the music itself with Garage à Trois, the current and original incarnation, I found that the All Cooked Out, you know, I know Mystery Funk is the first record, but All Cooked Out is kind of the genesis of this collaboration and connection. And
well, those two records were made at the same time.
Okay. You went in there to do the All Cooked Out and then ended up making Mystery Funk. Is that?
Yeah. We had an extra day in the studio, and we're like, oh, let's just let's mess around and, you know, record, just improvise and do some different stuff, because we'd done a lot of songs, the pre-written material, you know,
right.
Before. That's where that came from. And it was just the three of us too, whereas the All Cooked Out had special guests on a bunch of songs.
Right.
Yeah.
But you play a lot of the All Cooked Out material, or a good chunk of it, in this, you know, OGGAT configuration.
Yeah, we like we sip on the nostalgia bottle and bust it out for people, you know, some of those tunes. I like some of those tunes, and I don't get to play them anywhere else, so. it's cool for me to play them again, 20 years later, however many years later.
Yeah. 20, 22, 23 years later. And I was going to say, but the new stuff with Calm Down Cologne, it fits right into that groove. And I was doing a little homework on it. I understand that you didn't really go into the studio with songs for the new record, save for the title track. Am I right?
Exactly. Yeah. Charlie wanted to, he just wanted to improvise. We were doing a 3-night run at Nectar in Seattle, and it was the Sunday, and we'd been doing a lot of improvising at the shows, which was really fun. And so he didn't want to do a song thing, and and he writes a lot too. So I thought that was an interesting choice and really cool too. And we had the perfect engineer for that too, Randall Duns. He's always about capturing improvisation. And so after we do all that, I've been doing this stuff since the early 90s, just going through all the roughs after the session, and then marking all the good spots, and then carving out that like, oh, this is good. From 9 minutes 23 seconds to 14:11, this is a great chunk here on reel 2, and so then all the editing and muting and mixing can happen after that. The same with Critters Buggin and DRKWAV and stuff like that, Sound Cipher, those other bands of mine. It's like tracking the improvisation and then polishing it up, making it, into a finished form, So it's a very different record than All Cooped Out. But really, everyone's really into how it came out. Super excited about it,
Yeah. I mean, it's a great record, and I think it exists alongside of All Cooped Out, in a sense that it just, the players and the sort of evolution of each of you, and then reconvening all these years later. I wanted to ask you made a mention about the process of like sort of combing through the voluminous improvisations and sort of identifying and distilling the really potent parts. Is that something, is that how you created Critters Buggin music also? Was it that modus operandi too?
Oh yeah. It was all, we would just improvise for days and days and days, and then go back and listen and kick out the bad stuff and keep the good stuff, and then build upon that. We used a lot of loops and everything. So we would build improvisations around loops, and then go in and edit, do a lot of muting, cutting, a lot of overdubbing, weeks and weeks of overdubbing and mixing. It's kind of like making a movie, there's different cuts, and then you get to a certain cut and you send it to the music composer for the score, and then there's another cut made to that score, and then there might be some other adjustments. It's like a lot of back and forth. It's really fun. And Ponga too would do that. Ponga was completely improvised. Critters Buggin started writing music later on, but then a record would come out and you try and learn those songs that you improvised and cut up and overdubbed them. It's really difficult. We couldn't really do that with most of the music.
I was going to ask about that. Like, how do you then go and learn these little sections that were lightning in a bottle, right? You just caught it, and then you got to go back. But my question with regard to that is Critters Buggin and even Ponga, we're talking years and years ago. Critters Buggin especially into the mid 90s, right? So technology now, I imagine it's a bit easier. You can sit at home with headphones and your computer and comb through the jams and listen to the music and cut and paste them with an arrow and a mouse. You weren't doing that back then. What was the difference? Like, how did you do this modus operandi of improvising and then selecting in the technology of the 90s?
Yeah, it was a lot different. We did a lot more stuff in the studio, listening together, for hours and everything. And then the engineers would give us DAT mixes. So we had DAT tapes, and we'd sit around and so we would borrow someone's DAT player. I mean, I couldn't afford a DAT player back then.
Right.
$1,000 or it was no way. And so we'd borrow a DAT player for someone and just listen. I would just put the headphones on, listen for hours and hours, and make extensive notes. Like, I have notebooks full of markings from that stuff. But it makes me think of that new Garage Trois record, Calm Down Cologne, that the results that we came up with that day is like, we would have never written that, what came out of that. There's no way. There's, because the engineer Randall Dunn, he brought in this really cool synthesizer, this modal 002, I think it is. It's this English hybrid synth. And I started playing that and saxophone at the same time, playing these little lines. And so right there, you're working within certain limitations, right? Because I only have a range from F concert to E flat concert. So a little under an octave chromatically with the synth, if I'm playing one hand on the synth and one hand on the saxophone. So there's just all these things that you wouldn't necessarily, I would never write that way,
Right.
I'm going to come up with a song that's only between F concert and E flat concert. It's just, what I mean? You would just never limit yourself to that. So working within limitations and composing within the improvisational zone, man, you can get stuff that, you would never come up with. But, I love the Wayne Shorter. Improvisation is composition sped up. Composition is improvisation slowed down. Two ways to a similar result.
It's amazing to think of you with the horn in one hand and the keyboard in another. But you weren't doing that live. Is it something that is it harder to reproduce in like a concert setting, or you just focusing on the sax? Because I was aware that you used a keyboard on the new Calm Down Cologne record, but when you were performing, are you just playing those notes on the sax and just forgetting the keyboards?
Well, we only play one song from the new record.
The title track?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And you can't recreate that that's another thing that makes that record so special, is that you can't recreate it, and you can't. I mean, we could sit around for days trying to, learn that music and play it again, but it would never be the same. And that's been proven many times, tried with other bands. It's like you said, the lightning in the bottle, or
right,
trying to put the genie back in the bottle. It's like when fans request, oh, why don't you do that band again? There's certain people, certain combination of people. It's like, that was, 15 years ago, or that was 20 years ago. Or like, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. It's never going to be the same. Some bands or some combinations of people, might be able to be replicated and put back. I certainly wouldn't want to discourage that in any way, or, and I'm always down to try it. But there's some situations where it's like, no, that's not going to work anymore.
Right.
Too many things have changed.
Sure. And you're moving forward, you're looking forward, not necessarily trying to recreate something that happened before, but then occasionally, like with Trois, just organically come together to make music again. And it's refreshing, and these are guys, you didn't perform in this configuration for 2 decades, did lots of Trois, but it was not this configuration. So you arrive back at the embryo and realize it's still brand new again.
Yeah, and it's very much it's very much has to do with where Charlie is at now, and he's just in this certain zone of playing, and which allows for a group like this to play together again. Because Charlie and I we've kind of kept playing the whole time. Right. In other things, like we played together with Bobby Previtt,
Omaha Diner, right?
That too, but the Coalition of the Willing,
right? Yeah.
And Charlie went out. We did some tours where he was just playing guitar, playing like Telecaster, which was really interesting to hear and play with too. It was a very different experience, and amazing too. But then we had the Omaha Diner band together too. So, it was cool. And then Stanton and I were always playing together, with the other 2 versions of Garage à Trois and all of our other little things. Me playing on his various group, his trio, or Eric Bloom and I would play with his trio, making the Quintet, and then the Alan Toussaint thing, different things like that. So when we come back together and play, it's very easy, but it's also where Charlie is at. Wherever he's at, he's only going to play, he's only going to play with certain people and certain kinds of music where he's at the present. You know what I mean? And this just happens to fit his frame of mind and where he wants to be musically right now. You know what I mean? That could change next month, so I encourage people to come see the band now, because we might not play any shows next year,
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was a blessing that you guys came back together at all. And I'm glad that you booked something near me, so I was able to experience it again. I mean, the first time I saw you, it wasn't a trio. It was a quartet when you opened for the Oysterhead at the Sanger Theater. That was my first jazz fest. And that was like, really incredible evening. And not that music's a competition, but I'm a big Fish fan, so what got me there was Oysterhead. But when I left that theater, I was talking about Garage de Trois. I mean, that was what stuck with me that night. And really, it's like kind of, you know, opened the door for me to come back to New Orleans every year and introduced me to all the players in the group. And, you know, since then I've been following each of you individually in all these various endeavors, which is again why it's kind of heartwarming to see at the end of this I say at the end, after an extremely trying period of time, it's just, you know, it's like emotionally heartwarming to see old friends like you all come back together and perform this music for us. And, you know, I'm just grateful for that. And I don't want you to think that fans take it for granted. I mean, I hope that people heed your call to come to the gigs, because it delivered. And man, I'm just really thankful that I got to see you perform in that context again. But I've also seen you perform in, like I said, numerous other ones. And I wanted to maybe touch on, you mentioned DRKWAV, another improvisational band with 3 very unique, accomplished virtuosos. How do you step into that context differently, whether it's from mindset, musically, personalities wise, also a trio, also legends? How does that work for you in that world?
Well, that's easy. The thing with DRKWAV is Adam Deitch and John Medeski and I, for people that don't know. So it's a trio. We have a record out on Royal Potato Family. It's called The Purge, and it's so happy how that came out. But I mean, it's so easy improvising with people like that. It's the same thing with Bobby Previtt or Matt Chamberlain, drummer in Critters Buggin, or Bobby Previtt in Omaha Diner and various groups, Ponga, is that the 3 of those drummers, they are composers in their own right. They write music, and even more importantly, they're highly compositional improvisers. They're just constantly outlining perfectly everything. The path is just being made constantly with the foundation of the drums, the way they improvise. It's just, you know, I'm just constantly amazed. The 3 of those people particularly, it's a whole nother level of improvising. And it's a kind of improvising that I like, which is highly compositional. So it sounds like writing, sounds like pre-written material, but it's completely improvised. So it has the best of both worlds, right? And then Medeski, it's just, you know, he doesn't really need anybody else. So I just stay out of the way. It's kind of like Charlie.
Right.
You know, they're playing 2 instruments at once and just defining harmony and rhythm and flavor and sonic things and everything. So everything is there. It's very easy, you know, and it's really fun and it's very challenging. So DRKWAV, we just went into the studio in June and recorded a new record.
Sweet.
So yeah, because we have some acoustic stuff where it's grand piano, drums, and saxophone, and then all the crazy electric stuff where there's all these insane synths and, you know, old school electromechanical keyboards. Yeah, we did it with Randall Dunn again in New York and Brooklyn at Strange Weather, beautiful studio. So the roughs are just getting passed around now. We're going to pick out the good stuff and move forward from there, and hopefully get this thing ready for release at the end of this year, 2023. But it's going to be crazy. There's so much stuff, hours of stuff. It's going to be good.
I bet. That's exciting. And yeah, I love that project. Always so different, and always like seat of your pants. You're not sure if your head's going to explode, if it's going to be a train crash. But by the end, you know, you just come out of this just like sweating from just the sheer intensity, you know, and it takes a certain alchemy to create that. You know, people can play crazy stuff and be really talented, but there's a certain coalescing of energies with the three of you that I really adore. So I look forward to hear the next chapter of that project. And you know, we talk a lot about these instrumentalists, and I've heard you talk about how pop music, and especially like jam music, is really like guitar centric and vocal centric. And you as a horn player, you know, you've said it different ways over the year, but feel almost like relegated to the back, whether it's physically the back of the stage, back of the sound. Yet you're not a horn section, you're Skerik. You are a unicorn. You exist in this space all your own, at least in our generation. You know, I'm 44. So when I think of you, there's no real peers or people that do precisely what you do. I'm curious, at what point in your journey did you recognize that you wanted to maybe like be a guitar player on saxophone, or add sounds, scapes, pedals, whatever, to adulterate the traditional saxophone in a sort of like rock pop jam context? Was that something you just did? Was it intentional? And where does that come into your playing?
Well, you know, like a lot of things, necessity is the mother of invention.
Another great quote.
Yeah, so it's really just that. It's like you start playing with certain people, and it's not loud enough, and this music is super high energy. I need to get a microphone. I need to get an amp. I need to, maybe I'll just put some distortion on here because this part, I want this part section of music to sound different. So yeah, I was lucky in the mid to late 80s to be around some people that taught me a lot about electronics, and especially people like James Reynolds, he was an amazing synthesist and producer, engineer, and would do all these laser shows, and he would produce a lot of like new age records and stuff like that, but mostly kind of as a gig. But we would go over to his house a lot and improvise. And we had this little group called, I think it was called Bad Circus or something. And he was a very conceptual thinker because he was trained as a theater major, and his studio was incredible. Just all these incredible keyboards, and he just knew how everything worked. And I was like, I just kept hearing all this stuff in my head and I would just always just badgering him with all these questions. How do I do, how do I get this, So he advised me how to, I got my first Lexicon multi-effects processor, this LXP5, and how to get the signal in there, how to get some unity gain. Because there's a lot more resources for horn players, but in the 80s, there's nothing, there's nothing made for horn players. There's nothing, it's really hard to find information. There's nothing written. There's no interviews, or, you're trying to do research on it. You're really on your own. So you're constantly having to consult with people, because when you go live, you're just going to drive the sound people crazy. Right. If you have this jive rig and you don't know what unity gain is and how to keep your signal the same from beginning to end, whether the effects are engaged or not. So it's still challenging, but it's a little bit easier now. But so it was great then, hanging out with him and learning about all this stuff. And he was turning me on to artists like John Hassell, the great trumpet player, just passed away recently. And John Hassell was using pitch transformer, and all had such a vibe compositionally. And check out his records, like with Daniel Lanois and stuff. There's some amazing concert videos of him. It's, he was doing that in like the late 70s and stuff. So he's a super big inspiration. So, but that hanging out with James in Seattle in the 80s, and then playing with this crazy trio, Sad Happy, in Seattle in like 1990, 91, 92, which was super aggressive, loud, instrumental music. That's when I started using the effects live, not just in the studio and stuff. So that's kind of, and it was, when you're a fan of Jimi Hendrix and you're trying to keep up sonically with this group, with this trio, that's just what happens. You find a rat pedal and you learn how to get inside it.
I love that. And yeah, I was just always kind of taken aback by you just had this ability to just come in screaming with a very distorted, sort of abstract sonic impact. But in this sort of context that we're not used to hearing that. You might hear it on a guitar, but it's very aggressive. And I mean, I'm a metalhead. I love metal my whole life, even to this day. And, I don't know. I was going to ask if there's like a heavy music influence. You referenced Hendrix, but he's heavy. But I mean, was there you bringing anything from heavy music into it? Because you'll let out like a grindcore growl into the mic on your sax, and you'll play a lot of like really guttural, deep, distorted tones. Is that coming from a punk or metal influence, or is that just you getting hype?
Oh yeah, no, I'm super into all kinds of punk rock and like I'm wearing a Sun shirt or hoodie right now, which I actually play on one of their records, but I only just a little piano part. I don't do any of the saxophone stuff with him. But for sure, I mean, I'm a huge Melvins fan, and I like more kind of like death metal kind of stuff, real riff based, kind of heavy stuff. So with saxophone, I'm not playing chords, and you have to be, the distortion only works on certain parts of the horn where you have the bell tones and everything, the lower notes. So you have to write very specifically for it. But, I just love that, all that energy, and, just going crazy like that. Charlie doesn't like that as much. So Stanton and I, we don't do it in Garage à Trois. He's not so into the rock thing. So we focus on grooves and shuffles and really getting into blues and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, my other bands, you know, like Skerik band, we're playing this Saturday in Seattle. And, you know, other groups, I'm always trying to sneak that shit in there, you know. And, you know, Randall Dunn, our engineer who does a lot of these records, you know, he works on a lot of black metal stuff and recorded Sun and gone on tour, been their front of house engineer for years. You know, he's worked on tons of stuff. So, you know, I'm friends with Greg Anderson, who runs Southern Lord Records, all metal, super doomy kind of label. And I've learned a lot about heavy music from Randall and Greg and Stephen O'Malley. And Stanton and I have a trio with Pepper Keenan called
Corrosion.
Curb Feeler. Yeah, from Corrosion Conformity. So, I mean, Stanton and I are all about it all the time. So Stanton wrote that song, Drum Department. It's on a Garage Trois record with Marco and Mike Dillon. And it's all, you know, super heavy riffs. And so Dead Kenny G's was featuring that a lot.
Yeah.
Critters Buggin has some really good, you know, features of that, like Punk Rock Guilt, the song on Stampede. It's good examples of that. So, and I'm trying to start a band this year, actually, a trio where it's just distorted sax all the time, like every song where it's just, I have a super heavy band called Lorbo. Our new record came out a year and a half ago, but I play keys in that. And I use here's the Lorbo rig right there.
Oh, wow.
So it's like
Marshall stack.
Yeah, the Marshall. That's for the high part of the keyboard, kind of like a Rhodes sound. And then that's the bass rig for the low end sound. It's a split keyboard that I use. Basically, it's like a Rhodes and then like a Moog bass synth, but I use a modern keyboard just so it doesn't feed back. Because I think I'm the only person that's ever had a problem with the Rhodes feeding back. Like I've asked every keyboard player friend of mine, you know, like, how do I get the Rhodes keep from feeding back? You know, like they're like, what? You know, what do you mean? Like no one is running it through a Marshall, you know, like
right
back, you know. Like, so that's really fun, but it's not on saxophone, you know. So hopefully this year I'll have that together, and I will be super happy if that happens.
Oh yeah. I look forward to it. I got to check out this Lorbo, man. That sounds exciting. And I love heavy
Lorbo,
music.
yeah.
Lorbo.
Lorbo. Yeah, and we just put out this vinyl. It's on Bandcamp, Lorbo. It's awesome. It's Brad Moen, the singer from Master Musicians of Bukkake, and Low Life, and then Lupe Flores from Tacos and Wild Powers. So it's drums and vocals and keys. Good time.
Sounds awesome, man. We'll put the link in the show notes for sure. Yeah, you know, I didn't really realize that you were playing that much. It sounds like every time you mention something, you're like, oh, well, I'm on keys on that. So at what point in time did keyboard, have they always been a part of your arsenal? Is it something you've developed later in life? I feel like I'm hearing you talk about playing a lot of keyboards.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really. I just use it in Critters Buggin. I was using it just as another little texture, get away from the saxophone sound, and then trying to play with the rhythm section more. You know, when the saxophone play steals the focus, kind of, it's like a singer in some ways, and it's hard to comp as a saxophone player. It's hard to play rhythmically with the band, just integrate with the rhythm section. So the keys is really fun to do that. I'm not a very good keyboard player at all. It's just super caveman stuff that I do. I mean, there's really great saxophone players that are amazing keyboardists, like Peter Applebaum, you know.
Oh yeah.
That they've invested a lot of time in it, and they're astounding musicians. I just do little parts, little rhythmic things, and just really simple stuff like that, just on a need basis, you know.
Right.
But it's really fun, and I love it, and I have tons of keyboards and love to overdub on that on people's sessions and do stuff with my bands. It's really fun.
Right on. Yeah, and it just adds, like you said, more textures and brings you away from the sax and diversifies the sound. So yeah, that's dope. I know we're working with limited time. I got a couple more. I wanted to, we talked a lot of trios, but one of the bands I really dug, one of my first album reviews was for the self-titled Syncopated Taint Septet record back in 2003.
Yeah.
That was like one of the first album reviews, like just here, review this record for Jam Bass back in the day. And you know, I've heard you talk about it on a pod or maybe on an interview. You say that you get a lot of fans around the world coming up to you, talking to you about the Syncopated Taint Septet. Aside from the name, what do you think it is about that project that, you know, follows you around? It was because it's pretty niche and it's kind of like obscure, but it's not like a Garage à Trois or a Frog Brigade in terms of the notoriety. But sounds like people know what's up. What do you think about that project really hit with people?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the live shows really created a lot of impact, but it's the number one band that people talk about and ask about by far. Whenever I'm on the road or, you know, touring and playing different cities or it doesn't matter where I am, that everyone asks about that. They don't ask about Les Claypool. They don't ask about, you know, other people I've played with like Roger Waters, or, you know, they don't ask about all the other bands I've played in that sold tons more records, you know, it's really odd. I don't, it's very strange. But it's awesome too, because that band was just really a labor of love, and everyone sacrificed a lot financially, went broke doing it. And, you know, I'm still paying off records we made and legal fees trying to find our masters and everything, which is a whole nother awful, episode. But it was just so magical. And, you have 5 horns, Hammond organ and drums, and we're all from Seattle and we all knew each other. And there's just some really special composers in that group, Hans Teuber and Steve Moore. And they also doubled on keys. There was a Wurlitzer, so there'd be the Hammond, Wurlitzer, the horns and drums. And that rhythm section, I picked those guys because they were playing together all the time. Joe Dory and John Wicks. And so they were into hip hop. They were they were great jazz players. They studied, they could just play everything. So when they had a duo called Dose, and they played every week, at a club in town, probably even more than that. And they could just go from a Michael Jackson tune to a, Jimmy Smith song to some hip hop thing, like just instantly, just no problem. I mean, yeah, I really wish that band was together today in certain ways, because I feel there's a whole new awareness of funk and hip hop and played by jazz musicians that's really popular. And I think, no one did it like the Taint. Yeah, no one did it like, and no one continues to do. I don't see anything out there that did it like that. And we had really great compositions, but also really amazing improvising. And Randall Dunn, I got to say again, Randall Dunn was our front of house engineer. We were really lucky to have him on the road. And some nights we would walk into a club and he goes, "We're not using the PA tonight. We're not using the PA. Set up on the floor and play." People really remember those gigs too, because they would walk into a place like Wow Hall in Eugene, and it's like, what's going on? No one's on the stage, and we're playing all acoustically. I mean, obviously the organ is playing through Leslie, but he's playing quieter. And then we're walking around the space, using the space. I mean, it's, it's a real magical, moment when you can have that flexibility. Or sometimes we'd be playing. I remember we played in San Francisco. I forget the name of that club. It was like a U-shaped and had a balcony up top, kind of like Maison in New Orleans. What was the name of that place? San Francisco. I forget. Was it in the Mission? I forget. But we'd come out and do an encore with like no PA or something. He'd turn the PA off and tell us to play acoustically, and it just brings everyone together. Just like Maurice Brown. He has a great story of he's on tour with Anderson .Paak, and they're playing Madison Square Garden, and Anderson's like, "Maurice, I want you to walk and play trumpet from the other end of the stadium up to the stage," because he would have Maurice open up shows, I think, too.
Yeah.
Solo. And Maurice was like, "Okay, I'll put my wireless on, and have the thing." And he's like, "No, you're going to play acoustic." Like, I think he even told him to play it with a mute in on the bell. Something like that. You got to ask Maurice about it, man.
I will.
So it was like such a cool idea. And Maurice was like, "What? No one's going to hear it." He's Anderson's like, "Trust me, it's going to be great." And like, sure enough, man, he went and did it. Like, I'm trying to remember the story, but I think Maurice said it was great. And he said it was a great idea of Anderson, to have that vision. There's cool examples when people take risks like that. I think it creates a real direct connection with the audience and with people when they can get up close and they hear the instruments, not through speakers, but, directly, acoustically. That's a real special connection.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen that in a number of smaller things in New Orleans. And you're right. When the horns come out into the audience and you're just hearing it straight out of the bell or whatever, it's different. It fills you in a different way. It's intimate, but just what you're describing at the Garden with 18,000 people and Maurice. I mean, wow, that's incredible. And that's a risk.
Yeah, and of course Maurice can pull it off. He's incredible. Yeah,
definitely. All right, I got one more for you. I could talk forever. Maybe we'll do it again down the road because, it's a long list of projects you've been a part of. And, I'd love to talk about them all. But, you're a Seattle guy and you existed and performed during the Seattle era. But, you've obviously transcended that geographically and generationally. But a lot of people really hold on to your contributions to the Mad Season record and the live performance from the Moore. And I'm sure you've been asked about it a million times. I even asked you about it the last time we talked. I know you were on tour with Critters Buggin and this opportunity came through and you're friends with Barrett. Did you know that this was going to be something that would be held on to fans around the world forever? Did it feel like just a gig at the time? Let's take us back there to the moment you get the call and you perform with them and just that whole moment in time with Mad Season.
Yeah, well, for me, it was just another gig for sure, because I was on tour with Critters Buggin, and I think we were in Colorado. We were doing a bunch of shows in Colorado. Then we had a couple of days off, and then we're going to Texas to do a bunch of shows around there, because a couple of those guys are from Texas, Mike D and Brad Hauser. And then Matt had spent a little bit of time at North Texas State University, but just a little bit. So we had always had a good vibe in Texas. So somehow the gig, when Barrett Martin, the drummer for Mad Season and Screaming Trees, when he called me for the gig, we had already played together and I had played on their album on that one song. So, I was like, oh, let me see if I can do it. It wasn't, it wasn't like a,
right. You weren't just dropping everything.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I can do it. I kind of forget the details. Mike D or Brad would remember for sure. But anyway, it ended up working out. And so I went down to the gig, went to sound check, and Barrett is really generous guy and really inclusive. And he's really trying to like make the show really special. And he wants everything to be great. And so he was, can you play percussion on a couple of tunes too? And can you play vibraphone on this song? So I was like, okay, cool. And it was really cool that he would, that he would trust me with those instruments and everything that I don't usually play. And it was really fun. So I wasn't just playing sax on one song or two songs at the show. I was playing percussion and stuff. I was just having fun. It to me, it was just kind of like, oh, what is this? Like some bunch of rock dudes with their, they made all this money, and it's just like some Spinal Tap shit, like, is this like super group? Why aren't they in their bands? I was like, I don't know. The Seattle rock thing in the 80s and 90s, it was really tough, as someone who loved live music. I mean, I was a live music freak. I had ticket stubs all over my wall and everything. I was going to concerts all the time since the 70s. My dad was, took me when I was a kid all the time, every jazz show that was in Seattle. So whenever I went to like local rock shows in Seattle, it was 9 out of 10 times, it was like super disappointing, because you got to remember back then the PAs were like shit, just the crappiest PV kind of stuff. It just sounded like ass in there. And like, I think you really needed to be committed to that scene. So because 1 out of every 10 shows was like, there was something magical was happening, right? You were going to see Nirvana on a good night, and all of these guys will be the first in Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. I mean, all of them will be the first to tell you what I'm saying too. It's like, yeah, it's true. It was like, we were just learning our instruments back then, and it was rough. The sound systems were shitty. Maybe we didn't have a sound check. It was not like, that's the real, at the street level kind of like shit. It's not, you don't just go like, people's impression of Nirvana is from their records, or they see a DVD video, or they see them on MTV Unplugged or something. That's not where those guys come from. They didn't start playing in Rio with Pat Smear and stuff. You know what I mean? The second guitar play with a killer second guitar player. Like, that's not. They were just young guys trying to figure it out too. Dave Grohl talks about it all the time. We didn't know what we were doing. We just fucking played every day, or whatever, And so for me, like going to these famous clubs like the Vogue, they weren't famous at the time at all. Right. Just dives, So going to these places and seeing bands, it really sucked. So I stopped checking a lot of that music out, and I was more into like jazz stuff and everything too. So anyway, at that time, I'm much more into rock stuff now, but back then, in my 20s, I was much more into, nerdy jazz stuff and trying to learn saxophone. Yeah. So it was very few shows that were memorable and sounded good. I remember one, it was Halloween at the Central, and saw 247 Spies.
Oh yeah.
That? Yeah, that was amazing. And it was one of the best shows they had on that tour, and they broke up because they were fighting all the time, I guess. And I later became friends with those guys, actually, with my band Sad Happy. And we went to Electric Lady Land Studios in Hendrix Studio in New York, and we're watching them mix or something with Terry Date or something. It was awesome, you know.
Wow.
I almost got to play sax on something too, but then Branford Marsalis came and played. I was like, oh shit, okay, good. You know, like, oh good, that worked out. Those are just great guys, an amazing band, amazing musicians.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky to see, you know, Fishbone and Parliament Funkadelic and 247 Spies on the good nights. You know what I mean? Like the killer nights. They were much more consistent too as bands and much better musicians than the Seattle bands. And, you know, just way, it was a completely different experience. So those are the shows that had the most impact on me. So when the Mad Season thing came by, you know, I was there for Barrett. You know, he just was into all kinds of different kinds of music and was just so inclusive and open-minded. Oh, because a lot of rock guys too that in Seattle, they were super close-minded, and you know, they didn't listen to different kinds of music, and you know, it was just really boring for me. You know, it wasn't interesting at all. You know, so but you know, I'm still friends with Barrett to this day, and he's just obviously he started Tuatara after that.
Yeah.
You know, got into all this other kinds of music and everything, and he has a prolific solo career, making solo records and writing books and everything. You know, I could see him on that path then, you know, for sure, and I was there for him definitely. But I'm glad it worked out, man. You know, now I have a whole different respect for those bands, and you know, and very fond memories, and looking back at it, and then being able to play with the Seattle Symphony and Chris Cornell. You know, I'm standing right next to Chris Cornell redoing all those songs, and he's singing all Lane's parts, you know, a few years ago. Was that 2016 or something?
So strange how far away we are now.
You know, that was really fun, and you know, it was really great, and you know, it was really sad too that was, you know, last time I saw Chris Cornell. So just a lot of tragedy with all those bands too.
Yeah.
You know, Lane's gone, and I mean, thank God. You know, Lanigan, Mark is still around.
Yeah. Just got his book.
Oh my God. I was just going to say, I want to read his new, I read an excerpt of it. It's just incredible. It's just like, what? Yeah. And he's just one of my favorite singers. And now when I look back, you know, I have a whole nother appreciation for Lane singing. I mean, what are the odds that, you know, these singers like Chris Cornell and Lane Staley and Mark Lanigan, you know, so advanced and such unique vocalists, you know. I mean, I used to think a lot of the Soundgarden stuff was super corny, like really bad metal kind of thing. But when you break it down musically, you know, singing all these rhythmic phrases over the bar line stuff and everything, it's just like, man, it's really something special, you know.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
All those vocal harmonies that Lane was doing and everything, you know, it's just it really is, you know, they really were special.
Yeah,
it wasn't just some hype shit. There's some really great musicians in that band. Like Matt Cameron, I mean, what an incredible drummer, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, I did a gig with Matt Cameron a couple of years ago with Wayne Horvitz.
Yeah.
We were playing some extremely difficult. We played a Roscoe Mitchell song, Nonea. I don't know how it's pronounced, but you know, we're all reading this chart. It has metric modulation all over it. He memorized the damn thing. Showed up at rehearsals. I was like, do you need a music stand? For your Chinese? He goes, no, it's cool. I got it. It's just like,
whoa.
I mean, yeah, it was like, there's not even jazz musicians in town like that were doing that. So
I love the history. I really love just to hear the relationships and the history and how the music has, caught up to you, or you caught up to it, but it might have bored you in 95, and in 2022 it not so much. You understand the depth and the power, and it was ahead of its time. And if you think about vocalists, when you close your eyes and you can just hear a note and it's them, I mean, Lane, Cornell, I mean, come on, those guys, they're the iconic pipes, only sound like themselves. Although a million people have tried to imitate both of them in the aftermath, but if I could pick one of those bands from that era, it's Alice in Chains. I love them to this day, and it's just really, really resonates with me. So I'm a big fan of Mad Season, and I've always kind of wondered how you ended up involved. So thanks for breaking it down. So I just wanted to, again, thank you and say thanks for the music. Thanks for the time. And of course, down the road, when you have more stuff cooking and you want to tell the world, I'm happy to be the platform to let the people know what you got coming out. So
be on the lookout for new DRKWAV and new Sound Cipher. New Sound Cipher record just got sent to the record plant in New Orleans for vinyl.
What's that project?
That's Tim Alexander, drummer from Primus.
Yeah, Herb, right. Yeah.
Herb, yeah. And Tim Mason, amazing modular synth person and bassist. He toured a little bit with Master Musicians of Bukkake and some other groups. He's really incredible. Does the whole modular synth thing, and it's a really unique thing. So, man, that is a super fun project. And again, Randall Dunn tying it all together. And
he's the Kevin Bacon of all your projects.
Not even 6 degrees of separation.
Right on. Sound Cipher,
0.
We're on it.
Yeah,
we're
man.
on it. I look forward to it, DRKWAV. And yeah, man, thanks again for everything. And we'll be in touch down the road.
All right, B. Thanks, man.
Yes, indeedy. Want to say large up and big thanks to my man Skerik. Thanks to Skerik coming through the Upful LIFE Podcast, laying it down. I have to say it was a very interesting and thought-provoking and illuminating conversation. It's a tough nut to crack, that Skerik, but I'm glad I got him for a little over an hour. He could fill us in on just a smidge of the wide breadth of his artistic prowess and scope, wingspan. My man is he's all over the place in all the best ways, and serious as a motherfucker about his craft. An artist making art for art's sake. Gotta toast that. Gotta send that up. Tons of respect. So thanks to Skerik. Hopefully we'll get to do it again down the road. Second time I talked to him, first time for the pod, and I feel good about it. Hope you all enjoyed that. Please subscribe to the pod. If you're picking up what we're putting down, just smash that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined and have the time, please rate and review the pod on Apple Podcasts, or really your platform of choice. It really helps out with the algorithms, like I done told you a time or two before. And if you have any commentary or you want to make a suggestion or send some constructive criticism, feedback, suggestions for guests, hit me up by way of the email b.getz@upfullife.com, b.getz@upfullife.com. Love to hear from the listeners, and we appreciate you. I appreciate you. You can stop by upfullife.com, check out what Guan, and if you're feeling it, there's a donate button on upfullife.com. Much appreciated. And with that, like we always do about this time, we're going to get into the Vibe Junkie Jam. And I had to take it back to New Orleans. I had to take it to Tipitina's Uptown. The year was 2002. Colonel Claypool's Fearless Flying Frog Brigade. Skerik, as Les himself would call him, in the Red Devil suit. Claypool with the helmet. You had Mike Dillon, you had Enor on guitar. Robert Walters' 20th Congress opened. It's a legendary show in Jazz Fest lore. I'm going to play a few songs from it for the Vibe Junkie Jam. Holy Mackerel, Highball with the Devil, Cosmic Highway. So that's going to do it for episode 56 of the Upful Life Podcast. I'm packing up. I'm headed to the Crescent City for Jazz Fest after 2 years of silence. I guess, is it 3? Because we missed 2 Jazz Fests. So I guess it's 3 years. Yeah. I can't wait to get back. I got to make a stop in Los Angeles on the way. But you'll be hearing from us on the other side. And hopefully I'll have some content from Jazz Fest. I'm bringing the mics. I'm bringing my podcast machine. Have Zoom will travel. So with that, we'll say goodbye, Jah bless, and we'll see you next time. Yes, indeedy.
I'd say my highlight though was the last show at Jazz Fest for me was Sunday night at Tipitina's with Les Claypool, and that was out the box.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Where nobody is down. Are you ready? Are you prepared? We're going to go till the
young, I troubled over imperfection in my knees. To cultivate a pompadour, it's best to keep the top up full of the breeze. Cause hell, you know, Spotty was a poetry boy. He liked to pump up his pipe into the night. Since he showed him hits of ecstasy, Johnny Law, he took a decade of his life. That's a hunger life. shy. So we laid his money down, and he drank up, put sparkle in his eye. Sitting down, you saw his paunch. So he stood up and he gazed across the room. Then the toxin squeezed his head and he slipped back. Knew he left the seat too soon. Aha. Come on in, we'll be waiting. We'll in the power to terrorize. So we stay down for forever. You but miss upon you. Come on in, we'll be waiting. We'll in the power to agonize. So we stay down for the record. You but miss upon you. Come on in, we'll be waiting. We'll in the power to paralyze. So we stay down for the record. You but miss upon you. Oh, you brought it upon yourself, didn't you? Come on in, we'll be waiting. We'll in the power to sodomize. So we stay down for the record. Yeah! we'll be waiting, wielding the power. So we say now, on the record, you brought this upon you. You with the camera! Of the morning, do not attempt to steal my soul. Wielding the power. For if you knew, I will send the demonic cardinal upon you quicker than you can say lippity lip shits. Because he is here to enforce the spirituality, to contain each and every one of us to our own desires and whatever the fuck. We'll get the power to terrorize. So we state now, for the record, you brought this upon you. Come the morning, we'll be waiting and wielding the power to agonize. So we state now, for the record, you brought this upon you. The morning, we'll be waiting, wielding the power to paralyze. So we say now, for the record, you brought this upon you. The morning, we'll be waiting, wielding the power to paralyze. So we say now, for the record, you brought this upon you. The morning, we'll be waiting, wielding the power to sodomize. So we say now, for the record, you brought this upon you. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't know him, you don't love him, but you may grow to Mr. Dean Judson. So we say now, for the record, you brought this upon you. In the morning, we'll be waiting, we'll send the flower. Tagging night, so we say now, for the record, you brought this upon you.
At this rate, we should get there half past June. The Earth is rather dreary since we touch the sky on the cosmic highway to the moon.
Of the moon, the Earth is rather dreary since we sent the sky on a cosmic highway to the moon. But it's okay. 1,000 tiny voices softly say, do you wanna go? Do you wanna go on the cosmic highway to the moon?